Welcome to another edition of the Insider Mailbag. I'm Jared Johnson, and we have a lot of really good questions to get to once again this week, so I want to dive right into them. First one comes from Texas Tech Austin, who says, Adams and co. have done spectacularly with recruiting, which I agree, they've done a really good job. He says, but taking the Red Raider glasses off, where does Tech rank in regards to the rest of the Big 12? That's a really good question, and I think that's a smart question in terms of, all right, we get caught up in what Tech is doing, but man, obviously Big 12 basketball, it's very competitive, and yeah, several programs are doing really well, and it's worth mentioning. I think, I know people hate this, but we just call it like it is. What Beard has done at Texas so far in terms of the roster has been impressive, and I don't think that comes as a surprise to anyone. The man is a very good recruiter, and it is Texas, so they're going to have a good roster now. Whether he can put it all together, all of that, it's going to be fun to find out, right? But the roster is pretty strong. Kansas has done some things. They're Kansas. I wouldn't say this is like an especially exciting year in terms of off-season moves for Kansas, but they've made some pretty smart moves there. But the two that have really, well, before I get to that, I think TCU's done some things too. Obviously, adding PV. They lost some pretty big pieces from last year too, but they've done some things there at TCU. The Horned Frogs have, I would say they've at least gotten back to where they were last year in terms of talent. The Horned Frogs have. But the two teams that really stand out to me are Oklahoma State. Coach Mike Boynton. I know a lot of people, I understand this, as conference rival, aren't big Mike Boynton fans. And he hadn't really done a ton with the talent he's amassed there, but the guy can recruit. Just adding Musa Cisse alone from Memphis is huge. That guy is going to be a really good player for Oklahoma State. He's going to be a big player in the Big 12. So, adding a big man with that kind of talent, I think is really impressive. But number one, and I think this may surprise some folks, is Oklahoma in terms of their fit. I really like what new head coach Porter Moser has done. Now, the thing with Oklahoma is, yes, they have lost a lot. But I'm really interested in the Groves brothers that they brought in, Tanner and Jacob. They combined to put up 60 points against Kansas for Eastern Washington in that first round matchup last year. So, they're getting a couple really good players, and those forwards and some height. I think Tanner's like 6'9", and he was Conference Player of the Year. His brother Jacob's like around 6'7", so Oklahoma's adding some size, some skilled size there. And some of the other moves that they've made with the new coaching staff, it's just been like, that makes sense. It's a pretty good fit. So I think Oklahoma's been really smart about what they've done with their roster. All that being said, I still think Texas Tech has built a very competitive roster. I think it's going to be very fun to see. It's going to be more about like what all these new coaches can do, like who's going to be able to get these guys to play together the fastest, if that makes sense. And then once it gets down to really the crux of conference play, who's playing the best at the right time. So it's going to be interesting to see. To me, I feel like the talent is here in Lubbock to challenge for it all. I'm not predicting they're going to win the Big 12 title, but I'm saying they have the talent to do so. So it'll be interesting to see what Coach Adams and his staff, like how they do in terms of just coaching, getting their guys to play together, getting their guys to play every night, and the X's and O's and all of that. And then Texas Tech Austin also said, he meant to say last week, but he's glad to have me back. I'm glad to be back too, man. This is where I belong. So thank you for saying that. All right, Double T Dave wants to know when fall camp starts for Tech football. He probably knows this by now. He asked it earlier in the week, but I wanted to tell you, hey, it's today. When I'm taping this, it's Friday. And he wants to know if I'll get to attend any sessions this year. Yeah, absolutely. They've been very gracious with their access. They released a schedule here just last night. And I think there's 9 or 10 in-practice sessions that are going to be open for us, at least like 30, 45 minutes of practice, which is a pretty good amount of time. The way they've cut down practice now with these new NCAA rules, that's a pretty good amount of time to see some of the some of those practices. Now once they get closer to the actual season, it's going to be, I believe it's going to be pretty much closed up. And honestly, I would too if I was head coach. There's no way I'd have it open, in the week or two out from the season. So I completely understand that, but and that's not even counting like the post-practice availabilities. We're gonna get to talk to all the coaches, including Coach Wells, so throughout fall camp. So no, access is great. We have as much access as we've ever had inside the Red Raiders. So I'm very happy that is the case, and thankful that is the case. TTU in Colorado wants to know, is there any word or opinions from the coaches with all this realignment stuff, or are they just putting in the work and trying to get not too distracted? Yeah, that's really what I heard from Coach Wells, and I don't remember what the coordinator said at the local media day, but Coach Wells basically said, look, for most of the guys, it's a very veteran group for Tech this year, with all the super seniors and everything, but for most of the guys in the locker room, realignment's not going to affect them. I mean, they're going to play this season or maybe even next season, and that's going to be that, I mean, so they're really trying, and if you look at it, I mean, obviously for Coach Wells and his staff, I mean, they have to win this season, and coaches really look at it anyways like that way. I mean, they're not trying to look 2-3 seasons in advance, but I think this is going to be something more for off season, like, all right, season's over, this is what happened, assuming they have a good season, which I think they're going to have. Then you ask Coach Wells, like, hey, what do you think about this? How does this change the way you see or does it change the way you see this program and all that? So there's way too much that's, in my opinion, that hasn't been decided to know what that kind of reaction would be. But in terms of right now, no, everybody, in terms of the coaches that I've heard from and the players, are just kind of like, they're focusing on this season, and that's what's important to them. Texan 44 says, looking at the defensive line this year, he feels they will be above average at holding the line and run stopping. But let's talk about quarterback pressure and sacks, which, by the way, I think is a legitimate question. That's something I've had for Coach Patterson basically every year. It's like, how are you going to get pressure on the quarterback? Because you need to step it up, So Texan 44 wants to know, are there reasons to be optimistic? Yeah, I think there are. Here's the thing. For me, what the key is going to be is, what are they going to get from Raider, and how much are they actually going to send the Raider? Because a lot of times last year, I feel like Raiders were in coverage more. And I know it's a hybrid, it's a linebacker position, but that overhanging Raider position, really, you want to unleash them. And Brandon Boyer Randall is, he was like a track star. He's huge. He's got, in terms of he's strong to fight off blocks and everything. So he can bull rush some, whether it be tight ends or tackles on the edge. But he certainly can outquick them and run around them. But then he's also experienced. So, you'd like to see that guy be unleashed some and really produce some impact plays like sacks. So if that happens, that's a reason for optimism. I think Tyree Wilson, I like him. He showed what he can do against Texans right off the bat. So I think a whole year in the system and everything, because he was kind of thrown out there. They mentioned he was added the week I think they played Texas or something like that, or at least that's when he was eligible to start practicing. So I think him having the full season of conditioning and all that and being in the program, I think that'll help him. I think he could be a very good pass rusher. Nelson Mabanser is a guy that I've heard from, whether it be Tony Bradford or Jalen Hutchings or just other people on defense and the coaches, that if he can stay healthy, Nelson Mabanser is going to be a guy that can produce those kind of plays, those kind of sacks, I think. And he came in with that kind of pedigree of being that kind of player capable of doing that. So, and then I think just from the linebacker positions, whether it be like Rico Jeffers, Colin Schooler, Krishan Merriweather, you definitely have ability that when blitzing, that they can apply pressure on the quarterback. And I'm not saying they have to blitz to apply pressure, but bringing those guys from different angles, and even some of these safeties and corners, they're more athletic, they're more experienced. I think they're guys more likely to, and I think they're going to be better in the secondary, which will allow Coach Patterson, I think, to be a little more aggressive. So, yeah, all those things up. Those are my reasons for optimism. Now, then again, reasons, you didn't ask this, but reasons for pessimism, and we haven't really seen this, in the game. So I understand that people having the wait, I'll believe it when I see it, type feeling about that. Does any player have 7+ sacks on the year? I think that would have to come from a linebacker. And it's hard for me to imagine. I can see, I think the team leader is probably going to have around 5 sacks. Whether that's Boyer Randall or like a Rico Jeffers or Krishan Merriweather, who's blitzing a lot of Colin Schooler, or Tyree Wilson. Can he do that? So, I don't know if the scheme will allow someone like Wilson to get that many sacks, but I definitely think 5 is within reason. All right, here's the question. He says, does Tech acquire more sacks on D than they give up on offense? He said, because he asked me to kind of look up some stats from the past, and because it seems like Tech gives up twice as many as they actually collect. Well, I just looked at the last 2 years because they both were in the Wells era, just to be fair. And you know what? I was kind of surprised because last year it pretty much canceled each other out. Tech, as an offense, gave up 17 sacks for 98 yards and collected 16 sacks for 95. So like I said, pretty much canceled it out. And, that's not enough sacks right there. They need to come up with more sacks. 2019, though, they gave up 24 for 156, and they only collected 18 for 103. So that's not going to get it done. But that defense was really bad that year. And I do believe, if I had to say, what's going to happen this year, I think it'll probably be even, or I think Tech will actually collect more sacks. You're going to have experienced quarterbacks, Tyler Shuck's experience, Henry Columbia's experience. Both of them can run a little bit, and a very experienced offensive line. So I don't think they're going to give up a lot of sacks. And then you get a lot of experience on the other end. Like I said, those reasons for optimism on the defensive line. So, no, I think it will either be evened out or Tech will actually get more, but not a ton more, because that's just not how the scheme is. So, but we'll have to see. Maybe I'll be wrong. And then, which quarterback is the easiest, hardest that Tech faces to sack? Well, I don't know about the easiest, but Spencer Rattler, to me, has to come off as like the most difficult. First off, you got the Oklahoma offensive line blocking for you, but then the guy's just such an athletic freak. Sometimes at least he did earlier last season. He got better as the season went along. He tried to make the big play, tried to do more than really he should, and gave up some big sacks. But he got sharper as the year went on. I think he's going to have it dialed in, and Spencer Rattler is going to be really tough to get to the ground just for a number of reasons. So he would be number one in my book. Good questions, though. All right, Slade67 said, if Texas wasn't such a blank and ran off Missouri, Colorado, Nebraska, and Texas A&M, would everybody be in such a mess? Would the Big 12 be in such a mess as they are now? No, to answer your question. Big 12 used to be considered the premier football conference. It was. That sounds hard to believe, but there was a time when the Big 12 was at least 1A or 1B with the SEC, if not considered the premier, especially that Big 12 South division. when Leach was here, of course, when you had UT and OU and Tech and Oklahoma State was coming on, A&M. That was a salty division. That was probably the best. It was the best division in college football for a while. So, of course, you can argue if Texas ran them off, but you ask a lot of those schools, and that's what they said. They didn't want to be in the same conference with Texas anymore. So, if you could get all those schools back for Texas, would you do it? Absolutely, in a heartbeat. Anonymous wants to know, did Kirby Hocutt realize how bad of a recruiter Kingsbury was when he was head coach? Well, I will say that Kingsbury was forced to kind of retool or change his philosophy towards recruiting. I know that as a fact, but what we do know as a fact that what they have stated publicly, both Kingsbury did and Hocutt, is that he changed his philosophy towards recruitment. All right, it didn't work out, but they didn't change it because it was working. So yes, I would say Hocutt did. He said he was a great offensive coordinator, but terrible as a recruiter. It is hard to blame Coach Wells for Kingsbury's ineffectiveness. He says he thinks Wells is now showing he's a far better recruiter. Wells is a far better recruiter. His staff is a far better recruiter. He has more resources, has demanded more resources in terms of recruiting staff. There's some people on that recruiting staff that do a really good job. They're hard workers. They have great connections. So yes, absolutely. And then Coach Wells, he puts a lot into it. He's more of the CEO type. He is offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, and then he's doing the CEO type things and certainly recruiting. I know he cracks the whip in terms of recruiting. I mean, he gets after his staff. Most of them are self-motivated anyways, but anytime they need any help with motivation, I know he's there. Because it's all important. I mean, come on, it's college sports, it's recruiting. That's what it's all about. So I think, ironically though, I think what is getting Wells in trouble is, yes, just how long it's been, really things that weren't within his power, just how long it's been since Tech has been relevant, even regionally, to be honest, certainly nationally. But then where he has culpability is some of those in-game decisions, which were hard. Like if you ask the coaching staff, people, even just talking, they'll defend it. They really will. A lot of those decisions. It's hard for me to get there with them, to be honest. So I'm a Matt Wills fan. I think he's done everything right except when he can't get in his own way with some bad decisions. I'm not gonna. I can say I like him overall because of what he's done with this roster. I think he's done a lot of things right, but then still not like the in-game decisions he made last year. This year is a big year for him because of as much as Kingsbury's ineffectiveness and what he left Wells, well, also for some of those decisions that Wells has made. So it's not just, as usual, it's not just one thing. That being said, if they win like I think they're going to this year, it would be a great foundation. And I think we're going to start really seeing the benefits. I think it'll be a disaster if they have a bad season. I don't understand it if they let go of Wells, but it'll be a disaster for this program if they have to fire Wells and start over again and the roster just gets obliterated, because I think they are doing some really good things. They do have a good formula in terms of building this roster, and I want to see it play out. Whereas with the previous regime, there was no hope. What they were doing was just, I couldn't make any sense of it. So I hope that answers your question, but that's where I'm at with that. Tornado Watch says, we all know about we just talked about this, we all know about the importance of Tech needing to beat Houston in the opener, but what about from the other perspective for Houston? They're being talked about as possibly going to Tech with the Pac-12 and a lot of realignment talks because of that market they're in. He says, how big of a game is it for Houston, and how big of it is it in terms of a statement game for Houston? And if it is, how confident still do I remain that Tech will win? So to break all that down, I think that gets overplayed in terms of, I do think this is an important season for Tech, don't get me wrong. And I'm not saying it's not for Houston, but, Houston does have a better resume recently. They've upset Oklahoma. They, in the last 10 years, or actually 5 or 6 years or so, they've beaten Penn State in a bowl game, Florida State in a bowl game. So, they've done some things. They've won some games. Now, will it help considering the stage? ESPN, 6 p.m., everyone's going to see it on September 4th. Yeah, it would help either one of them. But I don't think it's the end-all, be-all. And I don't think that's those players are going to be, once the game kicks off, they're like, oh, man, we got to win for realignment. And I'm not trying to make fun of your question because I completely understand where you're coming from. I just think that sometimes that kind of thing gets overplayed, and that really it's going to be won by the players between the lines. I don't want to be cliche about it, but those guys are going to decide it, and then hopefully the coaches, whatever the chess game that's played between the coaching staffs will determine, along with the play, like I said, of the players, are going to determine the outcome of that game. And I think it's going to be really interesting because there's so many of those guys know each other. There's so many former Red Raiders in the staff, and of course on the team. So it's a really interesting game for a number of reasons. But I think that angle might, in my humble opinion, be overplayed just a little bit. All right, and finally, Teeny Pepper says, last week I indicated I had heard from several sources and felt confident about Tech moving to the Pac-12. He says, when this all shakes out, he says, do I still feel confident? Am I still hearing the same things? Gun to my head, what percentage would I put on everything? I don't like doing percentages. Certainly don't like a gun to my head, but I use that analogy too. First off, I don't remember saying I feel strongly they're going to the Pac-12, and then I heard from several sources, I have heard from sources, that is the most likely scenario in terms of that's a good fit for both. That's certainly it's my understanding that Texas Tech wants. But there's a lot of things in the air. What's the timetable for? Are we talking about in 2 years? Are we talking about in 4 years? who else is in play beyond Tech? What does the Pac-12 like? Do the powers that be, do they believe, okay, we have to expand for sure, and do they know when they want to? See, I don't know the answer to those questions. Now, in terms of my confidence level, because this isn't me backpedaling at all, I feel the same as I did whenever we're talking about, whether it be last week or whatever. It's been kind of quiet, really. I haven't heard like any news. I mean, there's been rumors being like swirling around, like Kansas to the Big Ten and everything. Honestly, I haven't listened to any of that because there's so much, I think more with realignment, even than coaching changes, there's so much nonsense that's reported out there that I have a real discerning ear. Unless it's somebody I really trust, I'm just not going to believe it. I'm certainly not going to report it. So I still feel as strongly as I did before. I just want to make sure that, and I'm not saying you're necessarily putting words in my mouth, but I want to make sure that I am effectively communicating where I stand. That yes, if I had to say I believe that's where Tech ends up is in the Pac-12. Do I feel strongly about it? I don't know how much I feel strongly about any of this. It's so crazy. That is what I believe based on the information I have right now. So we'll have to see. I still think it's going to be a wild ride. I think there's still a lot of different scenarios that could play out here that are beyond me possibly knowing it at this point. But we'll be here with you. We'll be on the ride with you, Teeny Pepper and all y'all out there. So it's going to be interesting. Never a dull moment. So, but speaking of never a dull moment, man, great questions from y'all as always. I really appreciate it. And until next time.